Now that we have a conceptual sense of options and optionality, let's move on to options as financial instruments. Recall that one of the characteristics of an option is that its value depends on, or is derivative of, the value of an underlying asset. As such, options are considered derivatives. However, other derivatives also exist, so options should be considered a subset of derivatives. We'll look at the development of derivatives in order of earliest use and relative safety. Forward contracts are the oldest form of derivative, followed by futures contracts, and nearly simultaneously by an early form of financially traded option called rights and refusals. Relatively recently, advances that we'll discuss in this lesson and next gave rise to modern option contracts, which are arguably the safest form of derivative instrument. A forward contract is a private agreement between natural sellers and buyers, like a farmer and a mill owner. Each element of the transaction, how much grain will be delivered at what price, is specified on a per-transaction basis for a forward contract. Note that if either party fails to uphold his or her part of the agreement, the other party will be economically harmed, so we say that these transactions are subject to counterparty risk. Futures contracts were developed to enhance the strengths of forward contracts and to ameliorate their weaknesses. The innovation was to move the transaction of commodity contracts to an exchange. The earliest example of this I can find is in Amsterdam in the 1600s. The exchange vetted trading participants, so removed some counterparty risk. However, the real advance in futures markets came in Osaka, Japan, the Dojima Rice Exchange, founded in 1697. The Dojima Exchange created contract specifications, a modern example of which you can see here, which specified commodity quality and relative price differences between grades. Dojima's biggest advance, though, was the development of what's known as a central counterparty. A central counterparty sits in the middle of every transaction to guarantee transaction continuity and remove counterparty risk from individual buyers and sellers. At about the same time the first European futures were being traded in Amsterdam, a new product called rights and refusals began to be traded there. In fact, in the supplemental reading to this chapter, I've included a convincing academic paper that contends that the birth and death of the infamous tulip mania bubble was in part due to government officials trying to force a conversion of tulip futures contracts to tulip option contracts. Rights and refusals were also traded on the precursor to the New York Stock Exchange and were priced according to a rule called put-call parity, which we'll discuss in later lessons. Modern options markets came about from a confluence of events, the first being the collapse of the Bretton Woods monetary arrangement in the early 1970s. This event increased the need for well-functioning liquid commodity futures markets. The next precipitating factor in the birth of modern option market was the publication of a mathematically rigorous option pricing technique known as the Black-Scholes model. The precision of the Black-Scholes model lit the spark of the option market, and the support of the newly invigorated futures exchanges kindled the flame.